Please welcome Ryan Sweazey to the parade deck stage.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Janae. Appreciate it. Thanks for the intro. First off, thanks, Andrew, for inviting this noob to the conference. Thanks, Martha, for all the support, and thank you, Janae, for everything you've done for me getting here and the foundation as well. My name's Ryan Sweazey. I'm the president of the Walk the Talk Foundation. We are clicking. So I'm looking at the lineup for the next 2 days here on Parade Deck, and it's an all-star cast, no exaggeration. We have about 42, I think, speakers with some incredible stories. You've already heard a lot of those. And when I was invited here, I was, of course, honored and humbled, but a little intimidated, because I looked at these people with their CVs and their stories and how they've overcome adversity and how they're, well, far more interesting than I am. And I said, well, what the hell am I going to talk about? So for a little teaser, I guess, or spoiler, it's going to be a little bit about me and the foundation, but it's also going to be more of a sales pitch. So if you've been to a, I don't know, timeshare thing or whatever, like, you need 6 million points, it's coming. So be forewarned. What I'm going to talk about now is why we need to go upstream. So before we get into that, a little bit about the foundation itself. It was founded in 2022, about 3.5 years ago. I got to stay in my tea here. There we go. See, I'm a conference noob. And it was started for a myriad of reasons, but essentially because as a military member or member in the Coast Guard going through an administrative process, you're really hung out to dry in a lot of respects. You're not accused of a crime, so you're not afforded counsel. You're not given non-judicial punishment, so you're not afforded any representation. You, as a complainant, and usually that is equal to victim, are given nothing. So I like to use the metaphor parallel of, if you're giving a letter of counseling, let's say, some paperwork that's not going to have any impact on your career, probably, you're given the defense counsel's services to write that rebuttal. But if you are the victim of a career-ending reprisal, and you enter into this administrative kangaroo court of justice as a complainant, whether it be Inspector General, Equal Opportunity, Article 138, etc., you are given nothing. No representation, no guidance, no training, no counsel. You are, as the lawyers say, pro se. You are completely on your own, isolated, sometimes by friends and the chain of command, probably subsequently gaslit as well as you go along the way, in an incredibly arduous and taxing process. I feel that's incredibly wrong, but also an immense gap in coverage for our service members, and that's what drove me to find the Walk the Talk Foundation. We take in people who are going through these processes, these star chambers of justice. We advise them, we counsel them, and we are their ally, sometimes their sole ally, as they go through these months-long and sometimes years-long processes and investigations. We've been in operation for about 3.5 years now. We have about 450, 460 cases under our belt. Here's the team of 14 advisors and staff. And we have about 50, that's 50 active cases. And that's not a testament to my marketing ability or my advertising skills, as you'll see here on my PowerPoint slides. It's a testament to the broken systems of air quotes justice in our military. And that's what we serve on the client side, but also to address on the systemic side from a regulatory and legislative standpoint. Okay, now a fighter pilot's favorite thing to do aside from flying is talk about himself. So that's me, Ryan Sweazey, Air Force Academy graduate, F-16 pilot, former Inspector General. But more salient to this discussion, I was the victim of 2 reprisals and restrictions during my time in the Defense Intelligence Agency. So those 2 events, both as an Inspector General seeing one side of the coin, and then as a victim of reprisal seeing the other side of the proverbial coin, made me think, there's a problem here, and it needs to be fixed. And it's not just a Ryan Sweazey issue, and testament to that is the number of cases we've seen in a brief 3.5 years, pushing 500. It is definitely a systemic problem throughout the military. So why am I here? Here's the sales pitch. Here we go. 6 million points. Sorry, it was a timeshare brief. Fallout from that. As advocates, and we all are advocates here, every one of us who's wearing the hat, every one of us who you've heard speak, who will speak, we are all advocates for some cause. And I'm going to say the word ass here. I don't know if I can. I didn't clear that beforehand, but I'm just going to shoot from the hip and say it anyways. Apologize to everyone for any disparagement, especially to our COO, Francesca's mom. I know she really doesn't approve when I swear, so Francesca's mom, I'm sorry. But as advocates, we are kicking ass. We are doing so much work out there, a lot of us on our own time and our own dime, to move the ball forward in a myriad of issues. There are thousands of issues that need addressing in our uniformed service community, and we're doing great at that. But we're also failing. And we're failing for two reasons, as I see it. Number one, a lot of what we address, a lot of what we work at is too niche. It's too narrow in scope. And the other issue is that we treat symptoms and not causes. And this is going to get to my sales pitch here in a second of what we need to be doing a little better. This is a famous quote from Desmond Tutu, anti-apartheid activist. And he said, there comes a point where we need to just stop pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. And I think that's such a poignant quote for many reasons, but especially because, as we'll talk about, we're very apt as advocates and activists to see a problem and attack the problem, but not think about the proverbial stream. Now, after I retired, I said I would never make another PowerPoint slide deck ever again. Here I am, so apologies for the low-budget graphics here, but hey, pilot, not an artiste. So there's a stream, in case you were wondering. It's not Pictionary. It's an S, it's a farm. But it'll come into play later, I promise. That was 16 hours of work well spent. All right, so there's two things I need you to remember, please, from this briefing. Number one are the two problems. We're too niche, and we attack symptoms. Okay, so that's the two takeaways here. Very easy. Maybe number three, fighter pilot. Kidding. Okay, now this is, of course, goes under the blanket of no disparagement policy. On the right here, you have a person from the Inuit peoples, and he's got a really big red foam hat, meaning he's a Texan. Okay, again, this is just to make a point here. You have a Texan Inuit, essentially, and I apologize for my poor graphical design work here. But there's a point I'm going to make, and the point is this. If you're an advocate, for instance, of the plight of the Inuit Texan, of which is 0.1 billionth of 1% of the American population, your cause is important. I don't disparage that and I don't discount that, but perhaps it's too niche. I'm going to use a stupid example here. Let's create a group, make-believe group. It's the Advocates for the Rights of Left-Handed Army E4s born on a Tuesday. Okay, super niche. Doesn't exist, I don't think. But this is the proverbial Inuit Texan. It's incredibly narrow in scope. I don't discount that Army E4s who are left-handed, I being a lefty as well, should have rights. But should we be investing time, effort, and money into that cause? There's a game show, famous one, I hope you know it, Price is Right. And one of my favorite games in Price is Right is Plinko. And if you don't know Plinko, this dude here, or woman, stands at the top of the Plinko board, and they have a disc. And they drop the disc, and it slides like, back and forth, and maybe it lands in 0, or maybe it lands in 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever. And like, oh, we try it again. And when I think about advocacy work and our focus, I think a lot about this Plinko game. So let's go back to my ridiculous example of the left-handed Army E4s born on a Tuesday, and look at it from a statistical standpoint. Within America, and okay, these are rough numbers, so please, Poindexters, don't go, actually it's 2.2%. Okay, I get it. But let's just take my word for this one. 2% of the United States serve in the military, plus or minus. 34% of that 2% serve in the Army. Of that, 28% are E4, 10% are left-handed, and 14% were born on a Tuesday. And so I make the Plinko parallel to the Inuit Texan with a big foam hat to say, when you look from a statistical standpoint of what you are advocating for, what rights you're pushing for, what benefits, etc., you have to consider as well the standpoint of the recipient of that message. Imagine you are a staffer on a congressperson's staff or someone in the press, and someone comes to you and says, this is an important story, we need to get this out there, or we need to have legislation to advance rights, entitlements, etc., for this group. That number, 0.0027% of the United States, is 0.0027% of that representative's constituency, or potential clickbaiters, if you will, people who'll read the story. It's an incredibly small number. And now, piling on to this ridiculous example, imagine if behind you in line on the Hill, as you are clamoring for the rights of the left-handed E4, is someone or some group clamoring for the rights of right-handed E4s in the Army. And then, that staffer is quickly overwhelmed. And when they receive your brief, they say, yeah, this affects about 0.0003% of your constituency. What do you think that staffer is going to say? Plus, how quickly do you think that staffer will be overwhelmed by all the niche groups trying to advocate for all these individual rights and entitlements? This is why being too niche is detracting from our battle campaign, if you will. Problem number 2, we attack symptoms. This is my favorite. There's the stream. See, I knew it'd make that time worthwhile. There's my stream again. Okay, so the guy on the right's fishing, if you can't tell, and I wouldn't blame you if you couldn't tell what that was about. And on the left are the people falling in. So kind of hearkening back to Desmond Tutu's quote, we got to find out what's happening upstream and not just fishing them out. So I'm going to hit on a subject that's pretty near and dear to my heart, and I know near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, and that's veteran suicides. And I use this example. This is a recent quote this past April from Mark Warner. And he's talking about veteran suicide prevention. And I want you to read the quote from the Washington Post here. He said, funding suicide prevention efforts, they're pouring a $174 million grant into the program to cover various things, to include emergency clinical services, which is not really prevention at all. I think I'm not alone when I read when there is an uptick in veteran suicides, or it becomes a news issue again. The first reaction, a lot of people's reaction is, what's the VA doing? What is the Department of Veterans Affairs doing to combat this issue? But I'll bet you don't know this quote, and that is, of the active duty suicides, and there's a parallel here, in the last year, 29% of those members were going through a legal or administrative investigation or process. Almost a third. So when we talk about things like suicide prevention, how often are we talking about where that path to suicide begins? Probably on active duty, probably years prior, and 1/3 of the time having something to do with an administrative or legal proceeding. Addressing that is prevention, not the glove save measures that are sometimes pitched as being solutions. If you are not familiar with the case of the Red Hill fuel leak, I would encourage you to do a 2-minute search on the Google machine tonight or now. Red Hill will, I predict, be a case study in failure and betrayal of our government for years to come, and how our Department of Defense outprioritized the health and well-being of our service members and their families over other things, and we can speculate what those things are at the bar. But if you're not familiar with the Red Hill story, here it is in a nutshell. In November of 2021, about 90,000 gallons, and that's a dubious statistic provided by the Department of Defense, 90,000 gallons, probably more like 400,000 gallons of jet fuel were spilled from the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility into the aquifer, i.e. into the drinking water and table, poisoning about 90,000 residents in the area, military members, families, civilians. The Navy, who was, let's just say, reluctant to admit that outright, finally came forward and said, yes, there was a leak. And in December of 2021, the Department of Defense Inspector General system was energized into a thorough investigation, which subsequently took 3 years. And if you look on the right side, that's where the investigation was announced. And on the left side, November of 2024, that's when the report finally came out. And the number one recommendation of that report, and I laugh, but it's not a laughing matter at all, the number one recommendation after a 3-year deep dive was that it was recommended the Navy investigate itself to determine if it broke the law. That, my friends, is not getting at root causes. That is not prevention. So why do I bring this up? Why do I bring up veteran suicide, Red Hill, etc.? Well, it's kind of this question of what do these all have in common? And I picked 4 hot topics du jour. There are a myriad of them in today's news that are afflicting service members, current and former. Military sexual trauma, burn pit cancers, suicides, the Red Hill fuel spill. They all have, I argue, at least one thing in common, which is when a service member saw something go wrong, whether it was to them or somebody else, they had nowhere to go. They had nowhere to turn where the issue would be vetted with good faith, due diligence, and in a timely manner, and without fear of subsequent retribution. That entity, in theory, exists in the chain of command, the Inspector General system, the equal opportunity apparatus, but in reality does not exist whatsoever. That is a common thread. If we attack those, that single point, as a coalition, as an alliance, then maybe we prevent history from repeating. And apropos, on the left is a picture from Camp Lejeune. If you read the case studies and the sequence of events from the Camp Lejeune water crisis and Red Hill, it is nearly a carbon copy repeated. Why is that? 30 years at Camp Lejeune, eventually a PACT Act decades later, because root causes, the importance of transparency, the importance of independent avenues of redress, those things were not attacked after Lejeune, and voila, you have Red Hill, which is essentially Camp Lejeune 2. So if we're not hitting root causes, we are destined to repeat history. So what's the ask? Here we go. Here's the sales pitch. Aside from donating to my foundation, it's a slide. It'll be there. I'm sorry. Number one, keep kicking ass, which we are. Everything I've said, I don't want to detract from the message that what we do as advocates is important and impactful. We are doing great work that needs to be done, and you all are doing that as well. But we need to open the aperture. First of all, we need to get less niche, and we need to go to root causes. Imagine for a minute 100 advocacy groups, 100 advocates working together, attacking one thing, instead of this group attacking issue A, and then I walk into the Hill the next day and it's B, and C, and D, and E. If we all got together and said, what are the root causes? What is causing all of these symptomatic issues? And we banded together and we eliminated that one thing, and from that, we all reap the benefits. What if? And that's why this forum is so outstanding. It's an opportunity to talk about that, to pause from our daily grind and the tactical level and think about, okay, what's really happening and how we can eliminate it. That's my ask. That's my sales pitch to you. It's easy. My name is Ryan Sweazey. Again, Walk the Talk Foundation. Going forward, we are continuing to expand our mission. Again, we have about 14 advisors. That is now going to increase to about 16, 17 with staff. And we'll continue to press the attack on the individual-centric stuff, casework, advisement, etc. But as we move forward, my ask for everyone here today is to take 5 minutes out of their day, talk together, talk to me. Let's work together to get those bigger issues, to really make our time and effort and resources in the advocacy space, in the systemic space count. Thank you very much, and thank you. Thanks.
Ryan, thank you so much for standing up for those who often feel unseen in this system. Your work is making a real difference for service members who need you.